Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we have a Phalaenopsis schilleriana. This is a species orchid, and it's known for its mottling on the leaves, but then also its very distinctive lip toward the bottom of the flower. That curvy shape, it always reminds me of someone's like beard or facial hair. Anyway, this orchid is in bloom again, and we'll use this video to kind of show you how this orchid was doing leading up to the bloom. So going back in time, September 2019, it was growing a new leaf, and then it was not until the end of 2019 that it started to put out a flower spike. And initially, I didn't want to stake the flower spike just like I have always done with my orchids. But this year I decided that I wanted to try something new, so I actually used a twist tie and then use a stick to prop it up after the flower spike grew longer. So this is something new because for its previous two blooming cycle, I did not stake up the flower spike at all because I still prefer to see flower spikes growing and blooming in its own natural pendant look. And so it was during winter time that it started to put out the spike, and it has always been that this orchid would start really early, probably the earliest amongst all my other orchids, and then it would take its own sweet time to develop the spike, the buds, the eventual bloom. It takes about 3 months altogether, from December all the way to about March, which you'll see in a later part of the video when it first started to bloom. But overall, this orchid is one of my favorite because of its species status, but then also, the leaves, when it's not in bloom, the leaves are still just so nice to look at. And there are different types of schilleriana. There is a type that has they call it the silver leaf schilleriana because the leaves are more silvery or more gray, and then you would have marking and patterns that are in darker green or darker green / purple color tone to it. And this one is not the silver leaf type, I don't think. This one is just the typical type that has a little bit of gray and green color in between the markings. Now, this orchid has 4 buds to begin with, and then eventually it grew to have 3 flowers. It grew to it bloomed with really 3 flowers. The last bud, you can tell already that the color wasn't quite right, and I knew that was the bud that would blast. At that time in my environment, it was still pretty cold. At least the daytime and nighttime temperature, there's a big difference in the day and nighttime temperature. And sometimes I keep it just a little on the cool side, and it might have been a little too chilly for this orchid, so that last bud just didn't make it. And it could also be because of nutrient, because I typically only give this orchid quarter strength fertilizer, just like what I would provide to all my other orchids, pretty much all my other orchids. And it might have just needed a little bit more nutrient to be able to, I guess, grow that last bud out. I don't know. But anyway, this is what we ended up with, right? 3 blooms. I think still okay as long as it blooms, right? But I do have to tell you, last year and the year before it had 6 or 7 blooms, so this year it's actually underperforming, and I still need to look into why. I have some ideas, other than nutrients, other than my care for it. It probably has more to do with light exposure, which is quite different from the light exposure that I got in my older environment. My older environment was in an apartment building and on the top floor, so right in front of 3 big side-by-side windows, so the light exposure was really optimal there. And where I am now is first floor, and it's in a house, so there is a little bit more shaded area. The light exposure is not as good, so I think that may have played a part in this underperformance. This orchid is not a sequential bloomer. At least for this one, every time it finishes its bloom, the flower spike would die back relatively quick, very quick. And I think this year it would be no exception also. It doesn't have very, very strong fragrance. It does have something. If you put your nose really close to the flower, you can detect a little bit of fragrance, but it has never really produced very fragrant smell in my environment anyway. So this orchid, primarily when it's not in bloom, it's just a house plant that I look at for its leaves. It's not it's only when it's in flower that I look at the flower, obviously, but I think modeling leaves are something really interesting, so I look at this orchid quite a lot. And you can see different leaves, they have the marking distribution differently, and I think that has to do with the nutrient and the light condition when a particular leaf is growing, because based on my experience, it's not a very consistent marking on the leaves. From the same plant, different leaves would have different type of marking distribution. So this one is in semi-hydro, and you can see there are some old roots that have died, but there are still new roots growing into the media and reaching the bottom. So I am really on the fence about repotting this one, even though I feel, well, there are a couple area roots that could go back into the container. But I think what I may do is give this orchid another year to see if I provide more fertilizer or move it to a location with more light exposure, whether that'll improve. And if it still doesn't improve, then I will have to do something and maybe change the ratio of the medium, because right now it's a mixture of bigger pebble, which is hydrocorn, and a smaller pebble manto clay. I need to go back to my notes. I can't remember exactly the ratio for this one, but I think that this orchid, because the roots are kind of medium thickness, so I think I may opt for 1-to-1 ratio for this orchid if I ever repot it. But this orchid really doesn't require a whole lot of care. I know some people are worried, species orchids are just so finicky. It's not the case. This one, it has been reliably bloomed. It has been a reliable bloomer for the past 3 years, and I've never really had any problem with it, other than this year that the bloom count actually reduced quite a bit. So after it's done with blooming, there will be some research to do to see if there's anything I should do differently with this orchid to help it grow better and produce more flower for its next bloom cycle. But overall, I think schilleriana is something you should definitely give it a try. It's not a very difficult orchid to take care of, and when they grow well, they can produce flower spikes with multiple branches and multiple flowers. This is a young plant still. I mean, it's only 2 years ago was its first bloom, so it's still a young plant, but older established plants can grow really well. Do you have a schilleriana in your collection? What kind is it? Let me know. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!